Joining me here in the studio is retired U.S. General Mark Kimmitt. He's also a former Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. General, good to have you here in the studio.
Thank you.
And also joining us from Tehran is Abbas Aslani. He is a Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us. General and Abbas, stand by for me 1 second, because I want to look at what's actually being discussed here. What's actually on the table. Now, according to U.S. media reports, Iran would agree not to develop a nuclear weapon, according to this memorandum, and it would also be able to enrich uranium to a low level after at least 12 years. The U.S. would agree to lift its sanctions and release billions of dollars in funds, frozen Iranian funds, and both sides would lift the restrictions on transit through the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days of signing this deal. General, you were listening to the words there of President Donald Trump. You've heard here some of what's in this negotiation. What do you make of it all?
Well, first, I think we need to put it in context. This is not a deal. What it is, it's a proposal back to the Iranians. In my mind, this is a 14-point plan to respond to the Iranians' 14-point plan or 14-point offer. We shouldn't mistake what's going on here. This is the offer the United States is sending to the Iranians, and we're going to see where it goes from there. What makes this unusual is that it is apparently the case that Witkoff and Kushner are talking verbally to interlocutors from Iran, whether they have the capability to speak on behalf of the government or not, we don't know. My suspicion is this offer went through the Pakistanis. It's now with the Iranian regime, and they're going to take a look at this and see what they can live with as a basis to negotiate, not to agree to, but as a basis for negotiation. Personally, I think they're going to toss it out the window.
All right. Let's ask that question to Abbas Aslani, who's in Tehran for us. Abbas, you heard the words here from the general. He thinks this proposal is going to be thrown out the window. What do you think?
Well, I would agree that this is not an agreement, but this is more about the American positions at the negotiating table, because if they shared similar views, there would be no reason to somehow threaten Iran in the case of that they do not agree to those terms. The resumption of hostilities would happen. We have been seeing that these discussions have been volatile. One day, a military option is imminent. The other day, there is discussion on a likely agreement between the two sides. And this indicates that yet, gaps between the two sides on those issues that are being highlighted, in public statements in the media, yet remains. But that's why Iran tried to decouple those issues to focus on the immediate challenges, meaning ending the war and reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and also lifting the naval blockade as part of a peace agreement, and then to discuss the remaining issues, which is the nuclear related matters, in a 1 month time frame. And there has been no, let's say, precise discussions on the timeline or the level of enrichment or what can be taking place in relation to the Iranian highly enriched uranium stockpile. So what is being announced from the American side seems to be the American stance, and Iranian officials or sources do not confirm such things to be agreed in the negotiations, and they are saying that the nuclear discussion has been slated to be discussed and addressed later in the second stage, if there is any deal in the first phase of discussions.
Right. This second stage, General, one of those points here that's probably going to be discussed in that second stage is this so-called moratorium, a pause on the Iranian enrichment. Now, before, the U.S. were saying, this is our red line. Iran cannot have a nuclear program. Now they're talking about a pause. Is this the U.S. capitulating, or is this sort of an olive branch from the U.S. side?
Well, it depends who you ask. If it's successful, Donald Trump will proclaim it as the world's greatest deal out there. But again, I think it's important to understand that we have to first hear the Iranian response to this proposal. I would note that there are two issues that my colleague in Tehran brought up that are important. Number one is this issue of decoupling the Strait of Hormuz from the nuclear program. The United States would feel the other way. If you're going to decouple it, it ought to be the nuclear program first, Strait of Hormuz second. Second, he mentioned that there was a commitment on the part of Iran that we would start those nuclear negotiations on that decoupled timeline within 30 days. That has never been said. In fact, the Iranian regime has never committed to a date certain when those nuclear discussions in the second phase would take place. So it's understandable why the U.S. rejected the 14-point program, quite simply because it was open the strait, and maybe we'll talk about the nukes in the future, and we know how that would work.
Abbas Aslani in Tehran. Do we know who the U.S. is actually talking to? Is this Abbas Araghchi leading these negotiations, or is it the Revolutionary Guard? Who's in charge here of the future of Iran?
Well, you know, these types of discussions or decisions cannot be made unilaterally by a political faction or one institution or individual. And there is a clear timeline, a framework for these types of national security related matters, specifically those related to the negotiations with the United States. And that is the Supreme National Security Council, which is composed of the president, heads of the other branches of the government, some members of the cabinet, high-ranking military commanders, security-related, institutions, as well as, number of other who have been appointed by the leader. And when there is a decision in that council, normally the leader endorses that decision. And even in the case of these, let's say, negotiations and talks with the United States, this has been coordinated with the leader himself. And there's quite a kind of unity and coordination among different type of officials in the Iranian government, from the cabinet to the establishment to those military and security related institutions and officials, on the quality of negotiations with the U.S., the agenda, and whether or not to engage in any round of negotiations.
All right.
And this deliberation should not make the U.S. to misinterpret this as a division or fracture. And comparing even to nuclear negotiations back before 2015, the unity or synchronization this time is even much more visible.
Okay, Abbas Aslani, live for us from Tehran. You are a senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. Thank you so much, sir. Also, thank you, General Mark Kimmett, for joining us here in the studio.